Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Journal Record's latest roundtable discussion. I'm Russell Ray, editor of the Journal Record. Our discussion today is entitled Seed to Sell. The topic, emerging business opportunities in the medical marijuana industry, from growing to processing to selling to regulating at all levels. It's a new industry, and it is a growing industry here in Oklahoma. Just last month, sales of medical marijuana topped $23 million, marking 8 consecutive months of increasing sales. In addition, more than 130,000 patient licenses have been approved by the state since last August. It's a growing industry, and joining us today to discuss this growing industry are 4 experts. From left to right, we have Ford Austin. Ford is the president and CEO of the APCO Group. And he is also the president and CEO of APCO Med, a dispensary for medical marijuana. His sister, Shayna Marino, serves as vice president. Ford has a great story to tell, and we're looking forward to hearing more about that later on in the program. Ford, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Russell.
Sarah Lee Gossett Parrish. Sarah is a third-generation attorney who represents a wide range of businesses in the cannabis market. The National Law Journal recently named Sarah one of its 2019 Cannabis Trailblazers. All right. Thank you for being here, Sarah.
Great to be here.
Zachary Williams. Zachary is the co-founder of Go CannaBiz, a B2B online marketplace for growers, processors, and dispensaries. Now, the Journal Record recently did a piece on Go CannaBiz, and we would invite our viewers to go to our website at journalrecord.com to learn more about that business and the industry. And Keith Laird joins us today. Keith is the owner at one of the owners at Okie Kush Club, a vertically integrated cannabis company. Keith has a decade's worth of experience as a grower in Colorado before coming to Oklahoma. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking our panel for their time today. Well, Ford, I think we'll start with you. Although it is a growing industry, many businesses, many dispensaries have already shut their doors and gone out of business. In light of that fact, where do you think these dispensaries failed, and how do you go about structuring a business like this to succeed long term?
Well, Russell, first of all, thanks for having me here today, and thanks to the Journal Record. It's an honor to be included in the Oklahoma cannabis industry. And to your question, the problem with these companies, these dispensaries that went out of business, is they're opening a dispensary. They're not opening a business. They're not opening a corporation that's going to last. They're trying to take a little bit of money and get out of the game. So they probably even planned their exit strategy as, let's open, let's make some sales, and then if we close, at least we made like 40 or 50 grand or even a couple $100,000, as opposed to setting your business up and structuring it as a real business with real levels of players, meaning your C-level players, your CEO, CFO, COO, CTO, really getting into technology is a huge factor in this day and age, and addressing kind of a bigger idea, a bigger concept. And that's probably the real reason.
Mm-hmm. Takes a lot of planning, long-term planning.
Well, yeah, you have to really know what you're doing, and you have to have a concrete plan. So for us, it was a very unique situation because we started our company based on, well, our great-grandfather got into the oil business about 100 years ago and struck oil with his partner, and they created a vertically integrated mini major oil company called Anderson Pritchard Oil Corporation, which then turned into APCO Oil. And they owned a golf course here in town, which is Twin Hills. They owned the City Place building, which they leased and had their name on it. So for a long period of time, it was the APCO Tower, and about 2,000 trucks. And basically, these people, being our great-grandfather, he set up a business to last generations. And even if he wasn't a part in the business for generations, he was able to sell out, take that capital, roll it into a family office, which we manage today, and we've been in the oil business for 100 years because of it. We still manage interests between my sister and our family members and I. And she and I sort of turned to each other when 788 passed, and we said, what a great opportunity to really honor the legacy of our great-grandfather, and also to be part of a new world for Oklahoma business. You know, we're all here because we see what people saw 100 years ago in Oklahoma, which is opportunity, a chance for a new industry that never existed before. And because of that, my sister Shana and I, we're redesigning ourselves. We're rebranding ourselves, rebranding our family business, which has been oil and gas. And now we're rebranding in a positive impact company in cannabis, whether it's medical marijuana or hemp-based plastics or hemp-based industrial products or hemp energy. We feel that it's really just one of the biggest opportunities that not only the state but also the whole country has seen. Since 1930, Russell, since 1930.
Zachary, are you seeing the same trends of dispensaries going out of business, and do you have any thoughts about why those businesses are failing?
On our platform, and thanks again for having me. It's awesome of you guys. But on our platform, we haven't seen anybody going out of business yet, and I think that's partially because people see the value in a CannaTech solution that we provide. As far as why I think people may be going out of business, I think Ford probably hit on a little bit of that. People just making a quick money grab. I think there's probably a lot of that. The other side of it is just the sheer reality of the fact that if you've got three dispensaries on one corner or one intersection, that's not sustainable. I mean, there's just no way around that.
And that's what we're seeing, right?
Right. Yeah. And you're also seeing, I think statistics speak to it as well. I mean, if you've got 3,000 growers and roughly 1,500 dispensaries, well, that's quite a top-heavy ratio when you look at growers just themselves. And if you're going to look at patients, if you're looking at a ratio of, say, 37 to 40 patients per grower, that's not sustainable either. So I think, you know, those statistics, as much demand is out there. I mean, there's plenty of demand, more people signing up to become patients. But I think those statistics just speak to an unsustainable level for a lot of people that don't know what they're doing or aren't set up for success, don't have a very solid plan. Again, speaking to what Ford was saying.
Yeah. Sarah, there was a lot of work done on legislation during this latest legislative session here in the state. They addressed enforcement issues, labeling, testing, employers versus employees. What are your takeaways or impressions from the so-called Unity Bill? State lawmakers passed this legislative session. Did it do what it needed to do, or are there still some gaps that we need to address?
Well, I will say I think the legislature did a good job when they passed Unity in not going overboard with additional regulations. I attended the hearing of the Joint Committee before they recommended Unity to pass, and it was very interesting to see both sides of the aisle and the Senate and the House discussing these things and coming together to try to reach a solution. And I took notes about what some of the comments were and what was ejected from that initial bill and what was added at the last minute, because it kind of gives you insight into what we might expect in the future. But I think all in all, it did the least amount of damage possible. I hate to put it in those terms. You know, we don't want to be over-regulated like some of the other states, but I also think it addressed concerns that needed to be addressed. For example, by design, 788 is kind of a loosely worded initiative petition, and when we passed it, everyone knew that there would be things that needed to be filled in. It's a great skeleton, but we've got to put the muscle on it. So I think Unity does that, and we can get into specifics if you want, but I think they did a good job. And then, you know, we have all these trailer bills, some of which are already effective, some of which are becoming effective. after one of them in November after Unity, but some of them with Unity because they didn't have an emergency clause, and so it'll be.
Can you talk a little bit about some of those trailer bills and what kinds of issues they're going to address?
Certainly. One that I think is of particular interest is the one that contains a grandfather provision. As you may or may not know, Unity changes the residency requirements for out-of-staters. And because of the amazing opportunity that we have here, many from other states want to come in and take advantage of that in a very positive, good way. And Unity now requires, in order to establish Oklahoma residency, that you either have lived here 2 consecutive years prior to filing, or for your OMMA commercial business license, or, and I think this is important, 5 consecutive years within the last 20 of when you file. So, for example, people who maybe grew up in Oklahoma and then they moved away, if they've lived here for at least 5 years, they can come back and file under those new residency requirements. But this trailer bill provides that those with existing licenses will be grandfathered in. Those who had licenses, but there's always a catch, when Unity became effective. And there's a question about the choice of language that has been the topic of discussion amongst my friends and me, my legal pals, on whether OMMA is going to take the position that it's effective when it was actually passed in March, or if it's effective when, for purposes of this grandfather clause, when the governor signed it and then it actually is implemented and starts to be the law August 26th. And for those people who are granted their licenses in that interim sort of purgatory period between March and August, this is a very important issue. And I hope that OMA takes the position that it will be everyone's grandfathered in who has a license when Unity becomes effective. But it will be interesting to see. That's one of the main trailer bills. Another one that they passed is the Waste Management Act that, people have probably heard about, and it creates 10 licenses for the transport of waste. It also, on a good note, redefines what constitutes medical marijuana waste so that you're able to dispose of certain things, that it even changes Unity in that regard. So you can incinerate or compost or, dispose of on your own things like the stalks and the roots and other.
Solventless stuff.
Yes, yeah, solventless stuff, which is a good thing for people in the industry. So that's another trailer bill. I mean, there are several of them, but those are the highlights.
A follow-up question: shortly after the bill was passed, a lawsuit was filed pretty quickly, claiming the bill is ambiguous and has a lot to do with employee rights. Can you talk a little bit about that lawsuit and how it might affect the industry moving forward? How does that play into the big scheme of things?
Honestly, I don't think that lawsuit is going to have a lot of traction. Truly, I really don't. And I think what we will see, regardless of that lawsuit, is OMMA continuing to develop rules and regulations. They're going to pass their permanent rules before long. Those will go into effect. And we're going to see a true administrative structure being implemented out there with, for example, an army of ALJs, administrative law judges, who are going to hear cases and matters that come before OMA based on issues that inevitably arise. And I think we're also going to see some of the gray areas that continue to exist in the law become black and white as a result of implementing additional regulations. And I think we will see in the courts the area of employment law further developed. I have, a law school classmate who is he's with an employment law firm here in town, and he's been concentrating on that, and it does raise numerous issues. And again, it's a gray area too, because there are not any objective standards, for example, of measuring if a person admits to having used their medicine, medical marijuana, of establishing, are they affected by it? How much are they affected by it? It's not like drinking alcohol, where there is a blood alcohol test. So it's a little more of a gray area within a gray area, and I think those issues will be resolved in the courts more than in our administrative rubric.
That's a big issue that a lot of the businesses that we cover, both big and small, they have a lot of questions about employer versus employee rights, and they're seeking clarity on all those issues.
Well, there's even a law right now where they're saying just because you test positive on a urinalysis doesn't mean that you are fireable.
That's right.
If you have a receipt from a dispensary for even full spectrum CBD, you're going to test positive on a urinalysis, and they can't prove that you actually had THC. So they cannot fire you from a job.
That's right. They have to have an additional reason. But, you know,
it can't be because they don't like you.
No. So, you know, that's true. Of course, employers who are really savvy are going to be, sadly, probably keeping a record book of other reasons that they could fire an employee.
Building their case, right?
Yes, exactly. And with Unity comes the safety-sensitive jobs provision that automatically knocks out certain sectors of the employment landscape from using that medicine while on the job.
Yeah. Good information. Keith, you were a grower in Colorado. Is there anything Oklahoma can learn from Colorado's experience on the grower's side of the business? Did Colorado make any mistakes, or were they perfect?
First, thank you for inviting me. Thank you guys for all having us here. I myself, after living all over the country, am proud to call Oklahoma home now. So it's awesome. The family aspect out here has been incredible. So I will say, as far as the learning lessons, there's a lot. You know, to take an established state that has done it for a while and see the progression that they've had, that has taken them 7+10 years now to really get established and get to 800 page of legislation instead of 28. So the gradual side of it is actually incredible that you guys are in this state in particular adopting rules that make sense, right? And taking it slow. And while there might be a lot of gray areas and we all have a lot of questions, at least we're not being pigeonholed into certain methods and certain ideas that may overlap and hinder the actual development of this industry overall. But there's a lot to learn from Colorado, from California, from Oregon, whether it's laws and policies, whether it's simply growing techniques out here is a heck of a lot different. I'm learning real quick about the heat out here and how that's affecting, how people are growing, whether outside or inside, and what you're doing with your environments, which is one of the most crucial factors when it comes to your grow. But absolutely, there's a lot of lessons to be learned. But the most important part, especially being a guy who's lived all over the country and from growing in Colorado, is to remember that this isn't Colorado, right? And that, whether you're on the grow side or dispensary side or whatnot, there's a lot of pride here, right? So to sit back and say, hey, just because this worked in another state is not guaranteed it's going to work here. So really taking a step back, looking at all the elements involved, and then going forward and coming up with your own game plan that works best is going to be the win. And then sharing information. I mean, that's what this is all about. We love talking about how are you growing, whether it's, at the stores or people actually coming to our grow to see us, like, hey, how are you growing? How can we help you? And seeing the different methods, what works and what doesn't, and then really defining what may be the best option for Oklahoma.
I'm kind of curious. I'm kind of curious about the panel's thoughts on what kind of grade you would give Oklahoma in preparation for this new and growing industry. What kind of grade would you give them? A+, D-?
Again, I'd say you're closer to an A than anything else, right? There's a lot of states that came out and they took a ton of laws and just threw it all together. Now, granted, with all the questions involved, it's tough. So the grade is sure, you could say an A when it sets up the industry for growth and allowing us to develop what it should be in Oklahoma, but it's towards a C when you're talking about the questions that we have, right? When a lot of it comes down to how do we do this, and we're operating for a year now, potentially, under a gray area. So all you can do is really put all your cards out there, do what you think is in the best interest of both your company and for the state and for your patients. So that's where you kind of find that even balance. Like, I wish we had a little bit more guidance, but at the same point in time, these trail bills and the uni bill coming online will start helping to solidify that side.
This whole concept that he's talking about, it really hits me in the heart, because I say it's going to be an A+, coming from California and relocating back home. All my friends in California waited 6 months for their licenses, and it was a couple $100,000 to get it set up. Talk about your legal fees, Sarah. So it was a really big barrier of entry in other states. And that was the great thing that Oklahoma did, was by creating opportunity for people who wanted it, making it a very low barrier of entry. And it also did another thing, which was a lot of the major players in other states, then because of that low barrier of entry, they just said, oh, the barrier of entry to this industry is too low for us. There's going to be too many people in there. We don't want to be a part of this melee. And I think it's really exciting, because we get to be a part of setting up all of this regulation. We're setting up all this policy. As business owners, we are the key indicator to the legislators about what is necessary, how to alter things. Because all they really did in the beginning was take everything from Colorado, everything from Washington and California, and assemble it into a really good framework. And it's like you said, now we're putting the muscle on. And it's from that feedback from people like us, from people who are running the businesses and they're learning about things, and then from the patient side, it's a really effective way for us to all come together and make that C grade part of it an A+ like the rest of it.
What do you think, Zachary? You think the state did a good job or bad job in setting up the infrastructure, the regulatory framework?
If I'm grading it, I definitely give it I would say a B+ to an A. And that's only because I think our legislators, as far as I could tell, and I went to a lot of those early joint session meetings last summer when they were just kind of feeling this out, how to proceed. There was none of the legislators I saw were operating out of fear. You know, I think that's that's something to be commended. And we're a very pro-business state. In being pro-business, they have given this state an opportunity to set up businesses, to give them a chance to fail, give them a chance to succeed. And if you're looking at it from that angle, which is the way I tend to look at things, I think you have to give them high grades in that respect. I think it'd be helpful in a lot of ways, like if we had more guidance towards, delivery of product and advertising and stuff like that. But I think as on the whole, as they've let things take place over a year, you have to give them high grades for that.
Anything to add, Sarah?
Well, I would second the comments that have been made. I'd give us a high grade. I think we've done an excellent job, and I think one of the beauties of our system is that it does allow the little guys to come in if they want, and those with that entrepreneurial spirit who want to test it, and albeit some of them may not be well equipped to do so, and they find that out, but I love the opportunity that it presents. And I think 788 was written so well and wisely to allow that. I know my colleagues in the International Cannabis Bar are like, SL, we all want to be Oklahoma. You're so fortunate because of your system now. And I do feel that way. And I think as time goes by, we will implement the necessary rules and regs and laws as they come along. And in the interim, I do think there's a great spirit of everyone's on the same team, where even at OMMA, I think those people out there are so hardworking and they want to work with the people in the industry to see it succeed. And so I just think we have a really great environment and a very exciting one here, and the world is watching. We really do have the attention of certainly the rest of the country, and I see that, and I'm sure you guys do as well when you travel.
Oh, yeah.
So they all want to be Oklahoma, and I love that because I think we're the best, But anyway, so.
Let me go back to Keith for a second, and this is a story actually the Journal Record is working on this week. I understand that growers don't have much guidance on the certification of seeds. And so what kinds of concerns does this create for growers? Is there a lot of uncertainty from growers on that topic?
You know, when you speak towards that, it comes back to really doing what is in the best interest of the state and of OMA when you have such a large gray area. Our grow came online a little bit later, and we ended up buying clones for that very reason, right? We wanted to buy stable genetics that allowed us to get ahead faster. So while there is an abundance of seed banks throughout the world, again, you know, without the overarching federal guidance and as well as state guidance on that side of it, I mean, really, it comes down to doing what is in the best interest of the state and for your grow operation itself. So for us, we found stable genetics that were local here that we really liked. We waited for that to happen, so we didn't really open our grow until the later months or the beginning actually of 2019, which really allowed us to get established and then move forward from there. So,
anyone else have any thoughts on that?
That's great, because what we now know is that almost 95% of the dispensaries in the beginning were selling products from out of state. So, I mean, because there was just nothing that you could prove. You couldn't prove that you even had a harvest that could be that mature by the time it was legal to open.
the time frame did not make sense.
Yeah, the time frame didn't match up.
Yeah.
So, but you know, we wanted to get the industry going. So, but you're a very honest businessman, so you decided to do it right.
Yeah, that's. I mean, at the end of the day, that what we've learned from being in California, being and seeing these other states, and that it has to come down to simply always staying above the fray, right? So if there's not a law, let's reach out, whether it's Sarah Lee or who can we ask for guidance. We're constantly calling OMA and their team over there, bringing up ideas, you know, whether it's on the grow side or dispensary side or whatnot that they haven't even thought of yet, whether it's third-party sales and parking lots, all these sort of things that you're dealing with, and especially on the grow side. Nutrients, we're waiting for Department of Ag to come out with their list. Colorado's list was incredibly comprehensive for what you can and cannot use. We're extremely excited for testing to come on board. That's the most important thing for our patients, right? And that's why we love being able to grow ourselves, to not only supply other dispensaries and not only teach other growers how to grow, but so that we know and we can control what exactly goes into our plants and what doesn't. And that's the most important part. And then to have the test results and the full panels to show that this product is actually healthy and safe for the end consumer.
And of course, now we all know that the Oklahoma soil has that little bit of extra magic in it. We all grew up with it. It's red and it's beautiful.
Very red.
It's very red.
Well said.
All right. Well, let me come back to you, Ford. You talked earlier about structure, but what about coming up with the initial concept for a cannabis business? How do you go about conceiving the business idea?
So, if you're talking about business structure, I mean, that's kind of like a long, ongoing thing that doesn't have much concept to it. It's more about just construct. So if you're building your company to go beyond just a dispensary, you may not even have just one business. Like, we have 6 different corporations to scale and grow our company. A lot of that is for different levels, different reasons. You know, we have a media company, and the reason is because we've been a vertically integrated oil family for a long time, and like being vertically integrated in any business is a good idea. But I noticed that if you're going to vertically integrate, and in the cannabis industry, everybody says, well, you grow, you process, and you dispense, and that's your vertical integration. But I feel like true vertical integration is going to have a 4th quotient, like Coca-Cola, like Apple, like IBM, like all of these major players who are gigantic corporations. They have in-house marketing. So if you don't have in-house marketing beyond just your social media, you're not truly vertically integrated. You're vertically integrated in the cannabis genre, but you're not truly vertically integrated unless you're shooting your own content, you're making commercials, because now you can do that. Our company just premiered a commercial campaign on Cox Media this month. And I think we were the first cannabis company in the state of Oklahoma to do that. I mean, well, you know what? CBD Plus has been doing some, but we're just happy to be part of it. So as far as structuring it, constructually, you need to have sort of a parent organization and another organization that just handles the THC, and then another organization that's going to handle a lot of the other daily operating things, like a holding company or something. So that's corporate structure. Now, if you're talking about concept, well, that's your imagination, and that's where it gets really fun. Like Okie Kush has this amazing concept that I love, the bear with the monocle, and a lot of their team are really great. Like our concept for us involves whole health wellness, and our first store on 23rd Street has a full meditation center because we felt that it wasn't just conceptually about THC, medical marijuana with the body. We feel like it's also meditation with the mind because not everybody has a patient card. So if you don't have a patient card, you're not going to be able to purchase THC products in the state of Oklahoma. But if you want to receive some of the benefits, which are relieving anxiety, relieving PTSD, getting rid of a lot of these things that just on a daily basis of being very highly functioning people, trying to be, you know, our best and be out in the world, making ourselves bigger, it's a stressful game. And if you meditate, it takes a lot of that edge off. So my wife, Lori Dash, certified in meditation, and I built a meditation center for her out of love. And that is what APCO Med Dispensary and Meditation Center is. So, and that's the first one. I think we've got about 20 left to build in the state, and then we're going up and down the Midwest. But that's like concept. That's all imagination. Like Zach's business is like, it's founded on meditation or on imagination. You came up with this amazing concept that not very many people are doing. A lot of people have a dispensary. Not very many people are doing what you're doing.
Well, those are kind words, but I think it was more. I don't know that I'm conceptually or that imaginative. What we saw was a gap. I mean, we saw a gap in business where there was. I mean, the connection we're seeing for the industry is really people looking online on social media, Facebook. We talked to some of our vendors that are using our marketplace, and you know, we've saved them that trouble of taking phone calls, taking orders over email, taking orders in the DMs. You know, it comes from everywhere. We've centralized that process for them, and we found them a great place to not only take their product to market but also to procure product on the market. And with that, not only do we bring some order management, some centralization to folks, but we also bring liquidity to the market. And that's what's going to keep this robust and keep things going forward. That's the way we view it. So, I mean,
see, but that's an amazing point because it's about a perfect storm of all of those elements. Right. You have to figure out what your company's structure is, what it does that's unique, and how you fill that gap.
Well put.
Yeah, and I think
and then you get this girl in here to do all your legal fees and take 40% of what you made.
Oh.
Sorry. We need you. We love you.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Well, that's a good point, Ford. You talked about creativity. I think Zachary's business is a good anecdote of that. Let's talk about marketing. And let me come back to you, Zachary. How do you market a cannabis business? Can you do it through social media? What are some of the challenges in marketing cannabis products?
Well, there's hurdles. For instance, like one of the first times we started doing our own marketing on social media, I think we ran into an issue because you can't have pricing. You can't show pricing anywhere on social media. I mean, it's almost like you can tell everybody what you're doing, but you can't let them know what you're doing. You know what I mean? It's just it's this odd conundrum that we all find ourselves in, and it's interesting that these companies that are based out of California and Silicon Valley take the position they do on that. So you don't want to get kicked off social media because it's crucial to it, to your business. So it's interesting how companies are being are taking different looks at it. It's great to hear that somebody's actually stepped forward doing commercial advertising on TV. And that's spectacular. But again, when we saw this marketing, this gap, we saw a way for folks to get on a closed marketplace, B2B marketplace, and do some marketing there. Not only do some marketing, but also join the overall marketplace. And that's kind of how we saw it, a good approach for folks. I don't know how other cannabis businesses are doing it, other than doing it on social media, other than doing it like promoting their events like the 1-year anniversary you folks did last night. I think that's really how you have to do it. You got to do the trade shows, and hopefully the rules will relax and we can be more. We can do it the way everybody else does it, but we're just not there yet. So you have to be innovative, and you got to be careful. It's a conundrum.
Yeah. Yeah, it is changing though. It's really changing that fast. As fast as these regulations are changing, the marketing is changing. As the federal, all the federal controls on what you can say on the airwaves changes, like we're meeting with cable providers right now about delivering the first Oklahoma cannabis TV show, and it's never existed here. I don't even think it's existing anywhere in any other state, but like we've already finished shooting our pilot, and they're salivating to get it on the air.
That's cool.
And I said, "Are you really sure this is legal?" And so we're looking through your kind of stuff and loopholes, and it's going to happen. It's like for the first time, we're going to be able to have a cannabis TV show on the air that's promoting cannabis use.
Cool.
And it's a very fine legal line that we're going through here, but we're going through it. And it's because, we're working on behalf of like a sea of disenfranchised people for decades. And we're changing culture. We're changing the way business is done because this industry never even existed. And we're changing the way that people are embraced for using cannabis. The fact that you are here in a suit and you're in the cannabis business is pretty cool. You needed a tie today, but that's okay.
I'm used to the call.
I'll lend you mine.
That's my
Yeah,
fault.
totally.
I said no tie. He asked me. That's my fault.
But the cool thing is, like,
It's on me.
again, I think I mentioned it earlier, like, we're all in the process of helping make change. Like, we didn't like what it was, so we decided to be a part of it so that people after us don't have as hard a time, and regulations get changed, everything gets altered, and through the business culture, because it's got to be done through the business culture. It can't just be done through, like, people getting together, and it's got to be a legitimate thing that makes money and makes taxes to go back to the states, to go back towards education. When, if you've got people marching outside of a capital in a state and you're selling cannabis, once the federal guidelines go away, all of those teachers will benefit, all of the students will benefit, all the schools. It's going to solve so many financial loopholes and gaps in the state once the federal government says, okay, it's no longer Schedule 1. Now you can move all the what was it, $24 million in taxes that you made? You can move that towards education. $7 million is earmarked for education. You can move that towards that. But until the federal changes that Schedule 1, you can't.
Speaking about the federal government and Congress, let me turn to you, Sarah. This is a cash-only business. Marijuana is still illegal under federal law for the most part, and so banks don't really have much confidence to offer their services to cannabis-related businesses. Are we any closer to getting Congress to allow banks to offer their services to this industry? I think specifically I'm talking about the Safe Banking Act. Yeah.
Well, a lot of us thought that we were. In fact, I was in Washington, D.C. last August and met with members of the Congressional Cannabis Caucus, and several of them assured me that within that time frame, within like 6 months, they thought we would have some kind of a bill passed by Congress, either the States Act or the CARES Act or something similar to the State Banking Act that would protect businesses in the industry, at least in the states where it's legal, up to where it is legal. But that obviously has not occurred. And then we were all hopeful with the Safe Banking Act that would get out of committee and get to the House floor. And it's kind of stalled out there. There was a similar bill filed in the Senate that nothing has come of. And so I'm disappointed, to say the least. I think that we are closer in that Congress realizes they have to, that it's inevitable, and the members of that Congressional Cannabis Committee are from both sides of the aisle and from the House and the Senate, and they're all working together. We're getting more people on board up there in D.C., every week in support, and even those who are not, there comes a point, the tipping point, when there's so many states where it's legal that it's untenable to continue with it federally illegal. And I think we're about to hit that tipping point. So I hope and pray that we are at least closer now than we were last August. But again, there aren't any protections. However, there are some brave financial institutions out there that are quietly banking cannabis customers. A lot of people may not know at the same time that the Cole memo was issued, and that was the memo under Obama that basically instructed the Department of Justice not to allocate any funds to prosecuting cannabis businesses. Well, on the same day, there was another memo that was issued called the FinCEN memo, and that was not nearly as widely publicized. And unlike the Cole memo, the FinCEN memo has remained. It's never been rescinded, and it quietly discusses, yes, this is federally illegal. If you're a bank, you shouldn't bank. But if you want to bank, here's what you do. And it provides guidelines for banks and for credit unions and other institutions that work with the federal regulators in how to satisfy them that what you are doing is above board, and how to avoid money laundering charges, basically, and how to vet your cannabis customers if you want to take that risk. And that FinCEN memo remains today, and as I said, we have some brave financial institutions that are doing that. And in Denver, there's a private credit union that's headed by a friend of mine, Sunday Seafried, the Safe Harbor Banking Program. And Sunday developed this and is now implementing it in other states, and it's basically a FinCEN compliant program for financial institutions to bank cannabis clients. And, there are a lot of third-party systems out there that are trying to help people deal with all the cash as well. But I'm hopeful that we're going to see some action in the federal arena before too long. And in the interim, we still have the FinCEN memo, and financial institutions can rely on that. Of course, they charge higher fees because you got to have this army of people who are consistently monitoring all of the cash flow and all of the accounts. It's
and a lot of man hours that go into managing it.
Yeah, you got to manage it.
I thought that bill that the representative from Colorado put out on the House Financial Committee had gotten moved to the House floor.
Well,
Ed Perlmutter, is that his name?
Yeah, I looked at it driving down here. The latest,
me too.
Yeah, the
Wasn't
latest
it
deal.
on
what
his
it
website?
was.
It said it went forward.
Well, I printed off the deal, or I had my paralegal print off the most recent thing about where it was, and I didn't. It may have made it to the House floor.
I would trust
a
lawyer and not me. I would trust you.
Well, do your due diligence.
That's a
lawyerly statement.
It had been passed to go to the floor and then
hasn't
debated
been voted
there.
upon, though.
And there's like 152 people who are backing it, co-sponsoring it.
It has a lot of
I think
sponsors.
there's a lot of support. It may be a really good one. And then the main thing behind it is, because I don't think you mentioned it, is just because of all of our businesses, in our dispensaries, we have hundreds of thousands of dollars just sitting there in cash. I'm not going to tell you our addresses, but it's there. And so we went out and we purchased these huge safes, and we purchased maglock doors and security systems. And the whole bill is just designed to get cash out of dangerous situations so that we aren't exposed to that liability, and people in the public aren't exposed to possible crime and people stealing and breaking in. It's a safety issue. It's exactly what it is.
Yes,
you can't just have that much cash floating around on the streets and in businesses. If you go into a Gap or another store, what is it, like 7-Eleven on their door says no more than $20 bills are accepted here, and we've only got $200 in the till. And now imagine if you multiplied that by 100,000 and you put it in the back room.
Yes.
I mean, there's places here that are doing that. And I'm going to go ahead and say we're not doing it. Don't go to our store. But there are places here, and it's just to have that much cash sitting there, it's Target.
I think the concern with the Safe Banking Act and all of that is more in the Senate than in the House. As far as passage, I think there's going to be more opposition. And the Senate bill has just kind of sat there. No one's done anything with it. But we'll see what happens.
Here's my concern about it. I don't want them to use it as an opportunity to say, okay, the problem is solved. We don't have to reschedule or deschedule THC and cannabis at all. I don't want them to say, well, we solved the banking issue, so now banks can make capital. Now corporations can get cash off the street, and banks can make the money they need to. I want it to also be the decriminalization and, helping people who are in jail for cannabis offense, and also, getting us out from that exposure to 280E.
Well, and I'll tell you an interesting development. One of the United States Courts of Appeals has pretty much told the DEA they need to reschedule marijuana, take it off the Schedule 1. And it's going to be really interesting to see what flows from that. I mean, we've got a lot of things cooking up there,
Just so we know, when something like that happens, what is sort of the time frame of the next thing that we have to expect? Like, how long would that journey be when he goes, hey, you've got to reschedule this or you got to deschedule it? Is this like 8 months later? Is this like a couple weeks later? Is this like a year and a half later? Obviously, you don't know. So anybody can tell.
I can tell you
I see
that
your eyebrows going up.
I was a former federal law clerk, so as a baby lawyer for a district court judge,
you're so
and
adorable.
then later I took over. And then I took over and finished out a clerkship at the 10th Circuit for just a few months. But so I have some experience with this, and I can tell you, there's no way to know.
Okay. All right.
They're not constrained by timelines. I mean, the district courts have a 60-day rule, and if you've got a motion that's older than that, or they used to, you have to put it on there and turn it in to the appellate courts to let them know. But there's not a timeline, and it will be interesting from a procedural standpoint to see if they bury it and hope that Congress steps in and does something, or if it's going to really be a court battle. And I think that would be an interesting way to resolve the issue. If Congress doesn't have the guts to take care of it, are our courts going to come in and do something that requires it? And I guess potentially, since we are in the federal court system and that structure, it could end up before the Supreme Court, where I'm licensed to practice, if we had to get up there, But that would be very interesting, too, if it did end up in the Supreme Court. And I'm trying to think, under what scenario that would happen. And I'd want to be there for the oral argument, I can tell you, as a member of that bar. Oh, my, yeah. That'd be a life changer.
How does our congressional delegation feel about it? The only representative I've heard even talk about it and taking positive measures towards getting us on a better path is Kendra Horn. I haven't heard Langford. I haven't heard Inhofe. I've heard none of our other representatives even talk about it. And I may have missed something, but
Sarah Lee,
it should be something they should be pushing.
Well, I think that Langford and Inhofe are not favorable. Yeah. I'll tell you that, and that's probably understated. And I think that Representative Horn is, and she's doing all that she can. But, you get a little hamstrung, or whatever the term is, when you
gotta play the politics.
So. Yeah.
Well, that's great perspective on a big issue, perhaps maybe the biggest issue facing the industry today. Let me switch gears and go back to Zachary for a moment. Big data is changing the way we do business in almost every industry. Should businesses in the cannabis space place a high priority on analytics and aggregation? Could that give them the advantage over their competitors?
I don't think there's any way you could get around it. I think if you're operating off the assumption of what comes in your store is what works, or how the rest of the state is how it works for the rest of the state, I think you're going to be mistaken. You're going to learn that the hard way. We do a lot of data aggregation. That's something we've been committed to tracking all along, and we've got those built into our platform, and we take that very seriously. We're in the first year here. I think there's a lot of data that is published and that you can see already in the newspapers. Just thinking of a Norman transcript article I read this morning. But as businesses need to gain a competitive advantage, need to analyze what's working best, what sells best, what grows best, where things go. I think your data aggregation, your data analytics are going to play a bigger part of the business. I think of this instance where I was at a pool party recently, and a very good friend of mine who's a contrarian by nature. We were talking about the prices of marijuana, where where the future goes for marijuana, and he tends to think he holds up his beer can and it's a Miller Lite. He says, this is what it'll all be in the end. And I said, well, maybe that's the case, but I drink a lot of different kind of beer. I like different beers. Sometimes I will pound a Natty Light. Sometimes I want to drink a microbrew, and I think that's where the cannabis business, the cannabis industry will go. I think you're going to see, these brands that do very well, and they're all over the place, and then you'll see your more niche boutique brands and stuff like that come along. And so I think in data analytics, that's where companies can gain an advantage, find out where their niche might be. They can use that data to their advantage.
Very good. Let me get in another grower question. What is the preferred method or preferred way of growing in Oklahoma? How is growing different versus other states like Colorado and California?
I mean, so the growing itself, when you're growing indoors, it's just about controlling your environment, right? So there's a lot of people who are going to be growing hemp. Hemp is just purely a yield, right? Let them get as big as you can, let them go outside. Growing outside is going to be a challenge within itself. I mean, soil's great, but the wind, the hail, the rain, and the bugs. So pest management out here is crucial. Having a solid IPM schedule and knowing what to look for ahead of time, and then knowing how to mitigate those issues once they do arise. So growing inside, it's typical no matter where you are in any state, and I say that just because of the elements that are involved. However, it will depend on how many AC units you have to have and how you guys are actually controlling the temperatures. The most interesting thing we found here, powdery mildew, PM, is actually not as rampant as it would be in Colorado because you don't get the huge swings in humidity that would cause that. So it's different state to state, even when you are indoors, again, just based on the outside elements, but you can control that a lot more just based on, how you set up your facility in general. So the cleaner the facility, the more sterile, and your ability to really control humidity, heat, temperatures, allow you to grow and then get into the analytic side to say, okay, now let's break it down to the science. What's our pH? What's our ECs? How can we actually foster this plant to produce the highest yields with the cleanest quality that we can possibly have? So,
Are they requiring you guys to RFID chip your plants yet?
Not yet. So that's where, again, coming from a market where Metric was on board, again, a statewide accepted system for seed to sale tracking. It was incredibly unique to say that from the moment that plant has roots, it was given an identification card. Yep, and then you had to track that. At any given time, we could have an inspector come in and grab that tag and scan it and say, in our system, not only is that plant, it started on this date, it was harvested on this date, it was put into veg, and all the way through the whole process, actually, all the way to the end consumer, actually has that same tag number associated with it. So that entire plant, from the moment it has roots to the moment it gets to the final consumer, is tracked. And that absolutely breaks down the ability for anybody to ship products from out of state, and it really legitimizes the industry here. So we're excited for that to come on board. It is very labor intensive. Every time you move 100 plants from this room, it's got to be in that room. Heaven forbid they come in and you get an inspection, it's in the wrong room. It's a huge violation. So it's something that we're excited for because of just the product tracking itself. No longer can you just, this plant's not making it, throw it out. It has to be tracked, and as a nutshell, the industry itself and all the officers can look at a moment's glance of exactly how many plants we have in our grow at any given time, instead of just the end of the month report and then auditing that to see where we're at. So, because over the course of a day, we could cut another 400 clones, but of those clones, what make it to root? And then you want to be able to see too, at the long run, what is this facility actually producing, and do the numbers match up? Based on square footage size and final poundage, it all makes sense. So the seed to sale tracking and a Metric coming on board, or whatever system they choose to use, is exciting for us. And I think it's going to take this industry just to the next level.
Well, we've covered a lot of information in a very short amount of time. And so I want to give each of our panelists a chance at closing remarks to cover any issues that we may have not discussed here, any big picture views about the future of this industry. If I could start with you, Ford.
Well, I think that obviously we're heading into year 2 here. Happy Canniversary, everybody. It's the whole time we're starting to talk about the tech side, I just see blockchain is going to really become more of a massive element of this industry to track everything from seed to sell, and also to just really solidify the industry as something that is trackable and relevant, that no one can change. So blockchain for me, I think, is going to be the future in a huge way, not only for cannabis, but I mean, we're all going to be, like, our kids are going to be tagged on blockchain, everything.
It's coming.
So that, and then you know what's going to happen with this 280E. That's, you said that a bunch of dispensaries are closed, and you said, man, maybe not yet, but 280E is going to happen. Tax time. That's when you're going to see a whole bunch of people that just have no choice, because they didn't structure their companies properly. They didn't separate the barrier between the THC and the non-THC products, so they have nothing that they can write off. I kind of get worried every time I walk into a dispensary or any sort of CBD store, and I see them selling a little bit of THC on one counter, and I watch the person go from that CBD area over to that counter and put their hands on that product and pick it up and sell it to you. After they're, like, because you can't deduct any of their salaries, you can't deduct any of the electricity, you can't deduct any of the rent at that point. So you're losing a major asset for your company. So if you're in a CBD company and you decided to jump into the THC world without having that separation, boy, you're really kind of throwing your whole company away. And so that, tax time, and blockchain, that's what I say.
Sarah, what would be your final thoughts?
I think my final thoughts would be compliance. Once you have your business structure in place, it's all about compliance. And I think the changing landscape is going to make it difficult for individual businesses to stay up on that. Hence the need for lawyers and consultants who help you stay compliant, because you want to be able, kind of like your taxes, you want to go to sleep at night and not worry. If you're a business owner, you want to go to sleep at night and not worry that you're out of compliance, because you're in big trouble if you are. And I think we are going to see additional rules and regs. I think OMMA may eventually become a standalone state agency, aside and apart from the health department, and in my opinion, that would be a great thing. So I think it's all about compliance going forward, among many other things, but that's going to be the ever-changing landscape, and I'll be interested to see what transpires on that front. You know what, and I hope to work with OMMA and others to highlight the gray areas so that one by one we can put them to bed and people know what they can do, what they can't do. As was mentioned earlier, they're gray areas simply because we're all a new industry. This is new for Oklahoma. So there are issues that arise that no one can anticipate because they haven't been in the business here. And I think everyone wants to get rid of the gray. And so I think that's a very important thing to do. And so I'll be watching on that front particularly and getting rid of the gray. And I want to say thank you for having me today and for having this roundtable. I think gatherings like this are very important for our industry.
We'll be watching and we'll be in touch with you to get your wonderful perspectives on this big issue. Zachary, final thoughts?
I think what I look, and this is such a cool thing to just be on the ground floor of something that I think is going to be exciting going into the future. I think what I look forward to seeing is more diversification within investment in the canna space and the canna tech space, if you're looking at it from my perspective. I think, you talk about the tax situation, the fact that you can't deduct much as a business, and so your margins are even smaller than I really think they ought to be. I think that opens up investment opportunities elsewhere in the canna tech space and in other spaces as well. I think you'll see investment move around, investment dollars move around, and I think that's going to be an exciting part of this business, of this industry, especially as we see the business grow or the industry grow and diversify as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Keith?
I think it's very important to remember to stay excited, right? And I think that's the biggest thing that throughout all the conversations I've had, both at Cannabiz and some of the other events, meeting different owners and remembering, and we talked this as soon as we got here, just how exciting this is that this is happening in this state and what's going forward, right? But then remembering the compliance side. So coming from Colorado and knowing the compliance is key. It starts at the grow. It goes all the way through the entire system to the dispensary side, and allowing the state to feel comfortable and proud of what we are doing as an industry. So I think looping all of this in together is the most important part. We need to figure out how we're marketing. I need to figure out, from the grow side, how do I connect with people who need our flower, right? And that's the big issue. There's still a lot of the smaller side conversations that do happen, but bringing people together and allowing these kinds of conversations to happen and openly and talk about it, it's amazing. I mean, the average shoppers and some of the people that we see at our stores are baby boomers, and it's incredible to see, this to see a generation proud of what's happening, and to see it really taking off. I think for us, all the way through, it's a matter of remembering the compliance, staying on top of it, helping give as much feedback to those who are creating the laws, and at least seeing that we're doing this at a gradual, steady pace that is allowing this industry to really succeed. So we're excited. That's the biggest part. This is incredible. I'm honored to be here. I'm proud to call this home now, Oklahoma, and we'll keep going from here.
It's a lot of energy in the room. So, Keith, Zachary, Sarah Lee, Ford, thank you so much for your time today. I want to thank our studio audience for being here. I want to thank our Facebook Live audience for tuning in. I've learned a lot. I hope you have too. We'll see you next time.